9 to noon.
Great setup, Bob.
Good stuff.
That indeed is the goal. Providing good stuff, 9 to noon at FM 100.3 KFAN. Good morning. It's Paul Allen on what will develop into a beautiful Wednesday. Thank you for listening to FM 100.3 KFAN. Been quite excited for this for a couple of days. Corey Chavous, a former Minnesota Vikings safety from 2002 to 2005. And during his time here, Corey had 14 interceptions and a couple of pick sixes from the arms of Detroit Lions quarterbacks. And Corey Chavous and DraftNastyMagazine.com, that is and has been, and I'm sure will be, the preferred draft analytical stop for 9 to noon. And yours truly. And Corey joins us now. Hey there, CC. Welcome to 9 to noon, and how are things?
I'm good, PA, man. How are you doing?
Excellent. Hearing from you, and excellent going to DraftNastyMagazine.com and, learning about the law firm that is South Dakota State and a couple of people, and getting to that throwback section where, we're old school, best school. Distance is never disdain. We're old school, best school. And like starting with Bryce Callahan and just going down through it, man, that just brought that was like down memory lane we go. That was really cool, man.
Yeah, well, Bryce Callahan, that was probably like about 10 drafts back now, Paul. We've been going at it for some years now, man. It's great to be on again. Just thinking about some of those times. Talking about Matt Khalil and players like that.
Yeah, it's now the NFL draft starts in 15 days in the Motor City. So how about this? Corey went to 12-0 during his career against the Detroit Lions. 12-0 with a couple of pick sixes. Now the Lions are a Super Bowl caliber team. What impresses you with the way Holmes, et cetera, have built these Detroit Lions?
Well, I'm pretty good friends with Brad. We spent a lot of time together because he was with the Rams when I was there, and I've gotten to know him over the years. And the one thing about him is that he's very meticulous in terms of just like I spent time with him even during All-Star games, looking at some guys and just knowing that how much he cares about it and how much time he puts into it. And really just some of the people I played against Dan Campbell when he was in the NFL and kind of know what he brings to the table in terms of, I think his football IQ is probably the most underrated part of what he brings to the table from that perspective. And I think their quarterback, Jared Goff, it's kind of was just as underappreciated to a large degree as Kirk Cousins was for a number of years. So I feel like when you have those three pieces together, you have a chance.
I am, and Holmes and his staff definitely are praiseworthy. With Jahmyr Gibbs and Sam Laporta, and just some things that they've done. Certainly Aiden Hutchinson with the draft over the last X amount of years, but. You know, when the Vikings and Lions traded a couple of years ago, and T.J. Hawkinson came here. All right, T.J.'s quite good. Of course, you know that he's fast. The routes are good. The depth of the routes are good, and T.J.'s a fine tight end. But you know, the Lions. What I respected about them is they were like, okay, we know we're giving you a good player, and we know we are depleting our tight end spot by doing this. But we also know you're going to have to pay T.J. if you want him. And we also know the 2023 draft might be one of the deeper tight end drafts in the history of the NFL. And we also like this Iowa kid, Sam Laporta, and we're going to beg, borrow, and steal to do whatever we need to do to get to his spot, and they did. I just have a high level of respect for people who forward think like that.
Yeah, I think you bring up a great point, Paul, with the kind of comparing it to how you projected Laporta, because he really played a lot at the receiver position in Iowa, outside sometimes at the X-receiver, even played a little wildcat quarterback. So I think you talk about their forward thinking. They had already seen him deployed. They've seen him in certain spots where a lot of tight ends don't line up as much as he was asked to do at Iowa, because their passing game, let's face it, particularly his final year there, was pretty anemic. So that was something, I think the point that you bring up about how they kind of saw what he could be within their offense to a large degree was a big reason why he had so much success and was probably their most consistent, or after Amon-Ra St. Brown, third down threat.
Corey Chavous with
Draft Nasty
Magazine.com. And what do you think of this, Coach Ave? Ravens general manager Eric DeCosta recently said, because of NCAA rules off the COVID year and NIL to a certain extent, more players are staying in college. And thus, this year's draft is basically void of draftable players when you get to parts of Saturday and, like, you know, deep in it, but like rounds 4 through 7. What do you think of that?
He said that the guys are undraftable. Why? Because they're too old. I know that's a big concern with NFL teams.
Yes.
Is the age to a large degree. But
yep.
I don't necessarily think that's almost like you not Bo Nix before being 24 years old, right, Paul? Well, if you think about it, 24 years old coming out for a quarterback with the age, we just saw Kurt get a 4-year deal at 36. You saw how much Aaron Rodgers got at 39. So I think the age has to be extended for that position. Now, if you're talking about running backs, for example, does it really matter if they're 24 or 25? Because you're probably gonna go for your next running back when they're 28 or 29. That's almost like being 35 back in the day. So I do think because of maybe the age being overanalyzed a bit, you're only going to have the guy for 4 years. So who cares if he's 21 or 24? And if he's 24, you're only concerned about that rookie contract, right?
Right. To start, I mean, but the assumption is, you know, if you're taking a McCarthy or a Penix or somebody, that you're going to hit, and you would want them there for a decade or a decade plus. And you know, I'm glad you went down that road because the ages. Yeah, I wanted to ask you about McCarthy. I mean, he turned 21 years of age 3 months ago, and Michael Penix Jr. I mean, this I like how you laid it out, and you're right, but it just kind of trips me out a little bit that when he gets his second contract, he's going to be 29 years old. I mean, that's just weird.
Yeah, no, I mean, when you put it like that, it sounds pretty, because if he's not, let's say, for instance, if you really like where he's headed in his career, it was almost like what we just talked about, Paul, with Jared Goff. If you're the Lions now and he's 29, is he going really into that prime, 29 through 33? Or do the athletic limitations begin to show up, right? When you next season, it's a little bit more, maybe even 2 years from now. That's what they've got to kind of ponder there. So, and when you talk about Penix, your point about Penix, when you've got 2 ACLs and you've got a shoulder injury, that makes his situation more pronounced, I think, when you do look at the age, because he's probably even a little older than his age suggests based on the injury history. So I think everything's within context to a degree. Fortunately for Detroit, Goff has been a relatively durable quarterback, so it makes the decision a little bit easier. But when you have those injuries, now the age becomes even more of a factor.
What, Corey? What? I haven't asked you this. What do you think about the transfer portal and how it's impacting college football?
Man, you know what, Paul? I really like it, and I think that the thing that it's done. I was just watching today. I was looking at Jordan Waters, who's been around a couple of places. Just ended up going to NC State with their quarterback that they got, Grayson McCall. He was at Coastal Carolina and probably one of the top quarterbacks in the country the last 3 or 4 years. And what it does is it allows some of these players who would normally go under the radar. Let's take a look at this year's draft. Jared Verse played at Albany, was one of the better FCS defensive ends in the country there, largely overlooked. Get a chance to watch him in his first career game against Jaden Daniels. I got a chance to watch him, and you could see that obviously he should have been playing, at the FBS level, and I think it gives an opportunity for guys like a Jared Verse to go from probably going undrafted to potentially being a top 10 or 15 pick.
Wow.
That's why I like the transfer portal, examples like that. And there's so many of those throughout college football. And it also gives a guy like Jaden Daniels, for example. He was about to flame out. Arizona State 2 years ago, final game of the year, the Las Vegas Bowl, doesn't play real well. You wonder where he was going to go. That staff kind of discombobulated out there at Arizona State. He finds a new home in LSU, and now he turns his whole career into what many people expected he would do coming out of high school. So I do think that the transfer portal has reinvigorated a lot of the players once they get to their new stops.
We are quarterback crazy up here in the cornfields, Corey, after getting that first from Houston. So as you know, of course, the Vikings have 11-23 heading into the first round, 15 days from today. Now, if the Minnesota Vikings trade up for North Carolina quarterback Drake May, how do you think that'll work with what they already have and how Kevin O'Connell runs offense?
I think the points you make about Kevin O'Connell and how he runs the offense, I think he's really just a fantastic offensive play caller. And I know there's been probably had some questions on maybe later, in some of the situations, but to have to deal with what he had to deal with there this year and to still have that prolific offense says everything you need to know about what he's capable of. But I felt like Drake May, because of how you attack defenses, particularly vertically and in the middle of the field, some of the throws that you're asking your quarterbacks to make, I think he has to be more consistent. I think on a down-to-down basis, you'll just see it'll kind of go all over the place from time to time. So the consistency part, I think, is something that would help with the repetitions within the offense. And the scheme, though, however, kind of matches his skill set to a degree. I think he would end up being a pretty good fit, and I think his arm strength would translate outdoors, which I think is an important consideration because you've got to play a couple of games in Chicago and Green Bay, and it may be for the playoffs, right?
Right.
So in that case, I would probably say the guy who's the better cold weather selections would be either Penix or McCarthy, based on how I've seen them handle those situations in the past.
And with JJ, in JJ McCarthy, given he turned 21 years of age 3 months ago, and I'm not draft nasty all 22 guy, and I'm not going to, the Senior Bowl and the East West and stuff like that, so therefore, 1,000 times more about it than me, but what he did at ages 19.
I don't know about that now.
Ages 19 and 20 for this kid. Are you kidding me? I mean, the maturation is obvious. Everybody can see it. And when they start dinging him for being like a game manager and, they're going to run the ball and play defense, stuff like that. Well, I mean, there's also something to be said for being a quarterback of a national champion who doesn't mess things up. And when you got those big third downs, he seemed to hit on every single one of them. And Kevin O'Connell said on the radio show a couple of weeks ago, he just made it sound like McCarthy of the Ballyhooed Four, the first four everybody talks about, is the one who operates from under center via the play action better than anybody. And all those things just really resonate with me with what they do up here. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and then on top of it, the athleticism. I think that's something with him that is vastly underrated. I mean, even if you were to look at, like, you look at most of the top corners in the draft, and I know a big testing drill would be the three-cone drill in terms of how they change direction. He went up to the combine, they had a 6'8" That's elite athleticism. That's like a top-notch corner coming out of school. It's probably better than most of the corners. And he also had a 4.2 short shuttle. So that just kind of gives you an idea of his athleticism. And then the big thing for me was on third down, no interceptions, didn't make a lot of mistakes in that area, which is kind of the opposite of some of the other quarterbacks that you have. Particularly, we were just talking about May and some of the fourth quarter struggles at times this year. But for McCarthy, I think the thing that you had to like about him, beyond just being able to make some of the more difficult plays outside the pocket, is he really relishes the moment in terms of he's a big game player, obviously, but I think he relishes the competitive moments within a game. So he understands what you're talking about. When they need him to make a play, I think those are the times where his competitive juices get flowing. He's a very competitive player. That's what I noticed when I watched him.
Chavous.
Jaden Daniels, the LSU quarterback. What do you dig, and what would be some of your NFL-related concerns?
Well, the sacks were really a concern a year ago. He was too quick to take off. Really, just not only in 2021, we referenced that a little bit earlier, but even last year, they were among the. You would never think a quarterback with that much mobility. And I know people always say, "Well, it was the offensive line was terrible." That's the excuse. I don't buy that. I think half of the quarterback sacks are probably on the offensive line, and the other half are on you. And they gave up 45 a year ago. That completely flipped around. The two quarterbacks who get rid of the ball and don't get sacked in this draft are probably Penix and also Nix. They were among the least sacked quarterbacks in college football. I think that's something you have to look at. Does it translate? It certainly has translated for me over the years watching that when the quarterbacks get to the NFL. But he improved in that area. He improved in terms of the pocket presence, Paul. And I think that that's something that you had to see him take the next step on, trusting it in the pocket one more tick, one more second. But I think he attacks when he does scramble. The difference between him earlier in his career and now, when he scrambles, he attacks vertically as opposed to horizontally. That puts way more pressure on you defensively when you attack in the middle as a scrambler. It almost splits your defense in half. So that's something that I think is going to be something that will translate. A little bit concerned about the frame, though. I went to go see him play this year against Missouri, got hurt in that game, the fourth quarter, led a fourth quarter comeback victory in that game, but had to come back in the game. And so the durability concerns with him, he hasn't missed a lot of time, but that's still something that teams are probably going to consider.
Hardcore football.
With former Viking safety Corey Chavous, draftnastymagazine.com is the website. And this is non-obvious draft analysis with one of the very best. And we're greatly appreciative that Corey's on the radio show. Just a few more here. With Penix Jr. and Bo Nix, and the Minnesota Vikings. All right, so Penix Jr., Nix, Minnesota Vikings. Do either of them fit up here maybe every bit as well as the first three we've mentioned, Daniels, McCarthy, and May?
Yeah, well, I think Penix is probably more of a – we went over ad nauseum the injury concerns earlier. But I do think from a vertical passing game and how when you do decide to attack vertically, I guess is a good point, off of your play action run game, if you get the run game established the way you want to get it established normally, I think he can do a lot. He has those, again, we talked about the weather, 10.5-inch hands. I know people say hand size doesn't matter. Well, he can control the ball, and I think he's the best deep ball passer in this class. So, yes, I do think it matters, but the injuries are a concern. Bo Nix, I like to see him getting more of a quick timing passing game. I think that's where he excels. I think he's probably getting a little bit underrated he missed some deep shots, but I thought in 2022 he threw the deep ball a little bit better than he did at times this year. But look, 77% completion percentage. I think that says it all about how much he improved during school.
That's fantastic. And lastly, with some quarterback-related takes from Corey Chavous, and hopefully we get the opportunity within the next couple of weeks to do this again if you have time, so we can hit on the law firm at South Dakota State University and some of the non-quarterback players coming into the draft. But lastly, on the quarterbacks, and I'm asking you about South Carolina quarterback Spencer Rattler, who, I mean, with all due respect, until I went to the NFL Combine, I couldn't pick him out of a two-person lineup standing next to Pat Williams.
I always love that one.
But now I'm hearing about all this swashbuckling nature, and when it's good, it's unbelievably good. But when he kills games, it's like he kills games in a hurry. And so I've just been waiting to ask you about Spencer Rattler. What's your take on that quarterback?
I think that what you said pretty much is the take. I think that's probably the best way to describe him in terms of like how his career kind of went along. And then Caleb Williams came to Oklahoma, and that kind of, I think, robbed him a little bit of some of his confidence. It took him a while to kind of get it back, and I think he did at South Carolina later in the season a year ago. That big game against Tennessee, that was the upset, 6 touchdown passes in that game, I believe. But you've had some moments where he's shown everything you want to see in terms of being able to attack all levels of the field. I thought he played outstanding in the first quarter of the Senior Bowl, got the MVP of the game. But I think for him, it's just going to come down to he's not going to be like some of these other guys we talked about in terms of mobility and being able to. I think he does enough within the pocket. He's probably a better athlete than the tested numbers would indicate. And I just think it's going to be about maintaining the same level of confidence he kind of regained this final year at South Carolina, maintaining that going into the league, because his arm talent is real. And I think he can do everything that you want to see a quarterback that you would draft in potentially the 3rd or 4th round. Maybe he goes 2nd round. I wouldn't be surprised. And gets an opportunity early.
My man, thank you very much for helping us. Greatly appreciated. And I will do a better job of staying in touch. And I look forward to chatting with you on or off the radio, okay?
No doubt, man. I really appreciate you having me on, man. I'm glad everything's going well.
Yep. See you later. Corey Chavous, Draft Nasty and DraftNastyMagazine.com. They have an online edition of the Draft Nasty, the Draft periodical. There also is a book that eventually comes out, but I subscribe to it every single year. And when I'm hosting the draft party with beloved Nachito, the analyst and the co-host of the Friday Football Feast, I have Corey's analysis in front of me for some deep diving on some takes from what these rookies have not only done in their collegiate career, but all the way back to their high school careers and like the players with whom they played. And it's non-obvious draft analysis, and he's absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much, Corey. Nordo, who's equally fantastic, produces 9 to Noon, and I'm Paul Allen. The state of the Hal, the Minnesota Timberwolves with 3 games to go, will be the bill of fare around the corner 9 to Noon in truncated fashion, mind you. Walking up to ProFootballTalk.com's Mike Florio at about 9:39, 9:40. And all of that takes place right here in the Love Covenant at FM 100.3 KFAN.
9 to Noon.
Into the paint, runs it up off glass. He got it for 2 more. 51 for Anthony Edwards, a new career high. First time in his career he's gone for 50 plus.
Alan Horton calling the victory over the Washington Wizards last night at Target Center, and down the stretch we come with the Minnesota Timberwolves team. Howell. Welcome back to 9 to Noon. The Timberwolves are back in action this evening, and They take on the world champions, the vaunted Denver Nuggets. That one for sports snobs is ballyhooed. For fans of the Howl, ballyhooed. And this one is going to take off at like 9 o'clock tonight. And it's a very, very compelling game.
And it's on the Fan tonight, too, so tune into that live.
It's on KFAN. I listened to the iHeart radio app last night with Alan Horton driving home from Lakeville. And something was revelatory with the call. And I've managed to, I thought about it a few times. It's not with Diletta Baudère, like rehearsing that 15 times a Thursday night before a Friday football feast. But like I said it a few times, it's the pronunciation of your guy's name with the Wizards, or we're like Avija, because we've looked at it a million times.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not, with the NBA League Pass, I'm not finding the Wizards unless they're playing the Nuggets or OKC super deep in the season, and it impacts what the Howl does.
Looking for phonetic spelling charts of names.
I've already forgot. Old people have forgotten. I think it's Avija.
Avija?
Yeah, it's something J.
Okay.
It's not Avija. It's like Avita J or something.
Ooh, Avita J.
But the Kispert cat, I had forgotten. Alan was just dropping nugget after nugget after nugget after nugget last night during that Wolves comeback when I was listening on my 23-minute drive home, and the Kispert cat for the
Corey
Wizards.
Kispert.
Right. We're familiar with the name, but not necessarily familiar with the game. And my man had a big box score last night for a bad team, but I had forgotten that he played for some really, really good Gonzaga teams, including one that went to the NCAA championship game and lost. So, even though it's porous team and they got players who few have heard of, they're not that far removed from high-end status for high-end squads in Division I basketball.
Yeah.
And so therefore, that's why yesterday with Chris Finch, I pressed him a little bit and asked him, when you're dealing with these non-playoff teams, it's low-hanging fruit here, man, and easier said than done because human nature gets to win too occasionally. But I mean, you just want to bury these teams and just make them realize that when they leave their facilities on Monday, they ain't coming back for months.
Right.
And that's Turks and Caicos, and that's Las Vegas, and that's Florida, and that's Punta Cana, and everything they want to do to spend the money they make during the course of the season. But then they played the game. And we're trailing the Wizards for more than half the game.
Yep.
And it was bugging me for a minute when I went to texting you last night. But then Anthony Edwards finished with 51, a career high. Covenant claps for that, by the way.
You just took over.
Yeah, 51's 51, but it's a career high for one of the better players in the NBA, and he's quite likable. But I was wondering if anybody was bugged that they were trailing the awful Wizards for more than half the game. It bugged me for a second, but it's in a lot of sports, we've seen this movie, thus knowing the ending before, knowing the ending previously, where, good teams will, for whatever the reason, they'll get in these meat grinders with these bad teams, but when they put the pedal to the metal, that's it. It's over in like 6 minutes.
Well, it's interesting, too, because earlier in the year, and Finch, you had asked him about it. Like, hey, what's up with all these blowouts, right? Like in December and January, XYZ team, they're hanging it up midway through the third quarter, down by 25, live to fight on another day. But you look at a team like the Wizards, yeah, they're awful, and they're not going to the playoffs, and all they have are sunny beaches and sunny days ahead of them this summer.
Yeah.
But the Corey Kisperts of the world are playing for contracts. Like the Zach Edey bit yesterday, and we can make jokes about it, like Zach Edey's going to be on the back end of a bench, and he's going to be on an LFL waiver wire for blocks at some point in his career.
That's a very good point.
In college, all these guys are assassins. The worst guy on an NBA roster.
Yeah.
Just like the worst NFL player that we can all joke about. He set records at his high school. He was a stud in college. And it's the same with all of these guys. Corey Kispert, and in the NBA, by the way, whether it's Jaden Daniels getting like a $125 million rookie extension, these guys are playing for cash. And so, it seems like over the last month and a half or so, PA, a lot of these NBA games have actually, those massive deficits and those blowouts have kind of shrunk a little bit. And so an opportunity for some of those guys still learning how to pronounce Avita J or however you say it. but he's putting up 25 and 10, and Kispert's hitting 5 triples. These guys are taking advantage of the moments.
It would have bugged me had it been a meat grinder late. I mean, like, you're trailing one of the worst teams in the NBA, and their best player, Kyle Kuzma, is not playing. They traded their best big, Daniel Galford, to Dallas, so they're void of size inside, and Rudy eventually made them pay for that. But it would have bugged me had it been a meat grinder late. But the Wolves pushed that button, that metaphorical button, and blew right on by. I mean, good cocksure teams do things like that. So Denver was in a battle at Utah last night, midway through the fourth quarter, but held them to 15 points in said stanza and won by 16. So on KFAN this evening, Wolves at Denver, and the winner owns the top seed in the Western Conference with 2 games to play. That's a massive, massive spot tonight. Jamal Murray has returned for the champions, and he went for an effortless 28 on 55% shooting last night in just 27 minutes. And the Timberwolves released a statement yesterday indicating Karl Anthony Towns is taking part in full contact practices, which means his return is on the horizon. Mike Florio from PFT, yeah, you know we, is next.
PFT, 9 to noon.
Time for 2 more.
PFT.
Hey, Mike, what's going on, my man?
Hi, Paul Allen. How are you today, Paul Allen?
Well, Mr. Mike Florio, I'm doing quite well. Hopefully things are well out West Virginia way. It's an exciting time of the year if you follow the National Football League closely, as many of us do, and that would include frequently hitting ProFootballTalk.com to see what's new with these rookies, what's new with Bill Belichick, what's new with these veterans, and stuff like that. And also, for me, to learn of some things Rick Spielman said recently via CBS Sports Podcast and a 33rd Team podcast with Charles Davis. I saw that at ProFootballTalk.com. Now, the Spielman piece, what do you think compelled Rick to postulate Minnesota will trade up and overpay for Michigan quarterback J.J. McCarthy? And good morning.
I think he's just reading the tea leaves, and good morning to you as well.
Thank you.
As we all do. We saw the week in which Kirk Cousins absconded from Minnesota for the $100 million fully guaranteed in Atlanta. That was Monday. Friday of that same week was when the Vikings picked up the 23rd overall selection in the 2024 draft. They didn't do it to use that pick. You don't pick up that selection weeks in advance to use it. You pick it up to trade it. And we've been expecting ever since then the next shoe to drop will be picks 11, 23, maybe the 2025 first rounder, maybe more, maybe something else, who knows, to get in position to get one of the top quarterbacks. Spielman of the mind that the Vikings have some degree of attraction to J.J. McCarthy, and I think he's right. If they want him, they're going to have to overpay to go get him, but they really don't have a choice. Now, the caveat to that is, and I think I saw an item to this effect in the Star Tribune over the weekend, you could sit tight at number 11 and just see what happens.
Right.
Does Michael Penix Jr. fall to number 11? Does Drake May fall to number 11? I think it's a risky proposition because you got the Bears at number 9, and they just have a handful of picks this year. They could trade out with the Broncos or the Raiders at that point, who would jump up and get the guy who's creeping toward the Vikings at 11, or 10, the Jets, who would like to replenish at a minimum the second-round pick they gave up this year for the Aaron Rodgers trade. They could drop down with the Raiders or the Broncos, and the Vikings would get screwed that way. So sitting tight might not be an option, but the other option would be to just say, you know what, we're going to go with Sam Darnold this year. We don't like any of these demands that the Patriots or the Cardinals or the Chargers or whoever might be making, so we're not going to move up at all. We're just going to use both picks. And it all comes down to who they like, how much they like him, and can they get to him? And are they willing to risk missing out on the 6 top guys? Do we think there will be 6 quarterbacks taken in the top 10? That's the only way the Vikings don't get any of them if they stay put. So, look, we assume they're going to trade up. But there is that option of staying put and seeing who lands in their lap, and you have faith that Kevin O'Connell's going to get the most out of whoever that guy is.
Now, see, and I agree with all of that, and it's laid out in learned fashion, specifically with if teams are trying to gouge you and like go more than 3 first-round picks, stuff like that. But the thing that was ears opening and eye opening for me with the former GM commenting on J.J. McCarthy is he didn't say, I think the Vikings should do. He said they will. And that just kind of had a tinge that he's been tipped off. And I'm not saying it's J.J. McCarthy, but I'm not saying it's not. But when he said they will, it sounded like he knew exactly what was going to happen. And then the Jefferson trade suggestion, and I just wonder what, if anything, the former GM has up his sleeve. Like he's never been this splashy as a GM or member of the media.
Wait, did he suggest the Jefferson trade?
Yeah, it was on the Charles Davis 33rd Team podcast, and it was I'd trade Justin Jefferson, and it went down the road of the contract situation that he reportedly rejected, which I find to be true. But I've talked about this a little bit this week, where laying it out from a baseline standpoint. If indeed you have an inkling that you're not going to be able to come together with him, and you've talked about this, or if he's uncomfortable with the future of the quarterback situation here, well then, yeah, draft night, that's something that you would need to consider. But all of that flies in the face of my intel, which is the two sides were incredibly close on the contract that was rejected. The Vikings, 10 out of 10, want Jefferson back, and Justin has voiced no concern with the future of the quarterback situation here. So things are hunky-dory with him. This is just out of character for the Spielman that I've known for years.
Well, and look, a lot of the stuff that happens in the NFL is nothing to see here, and they don't want us to know where the dysfunction is, where the hot spots are, until it's time to flip the cards and make your plays. Now, I said last year at this time that the Vikings, I believe, number one, want a franchise quarterback, their first one since Fran Tarkenton. And when you look at the names, and we've done a story with all the names in there, and it depressed a lot of Vikings fans to see all those names. There is some nostalgia, though, because some of those guys played well, but nobody was year to year. Dante Culpepper was the closest, and then Kirk, 6 straight years of 8 or more starts. The first guy since Tarkenton had 7 straight years of 8 or more starts. But if the idea is we want the franchise quarterback, then Cousins goes, and the next step is Jefferson gets used as part of the package to go up and get the franchise guy. And I said last year, if a long-term deal isn't done by the start of the regular season between the Vikings and Justin Jefferson, a trade is on the table. How can it not be? And when they start leaking out to people like Shefty that Jefferson turned down $30 million per year, that's not coming from Jefferson's camp. That's coming from the team, because if you are going to pivot away from him, you need to be able to lay the foundation that you were reasonable and he was not. Can you believe what he passed on? He passed on $30 million per year. It's a structural issue, though. I've been saying that for months. It's not about dollars. It's about how much is fully guaranteed at signing. They broke from their pattern to a certain extent with T.J. Hawkinson. Then they're going to break from it more with Justin. I think they're going to have to do 3 years fully guaranteed for Justin Jefferson. And, Paul, whatever the price was last September, it's gone up now because the salary cap went up 13.6%.
Right.
That was one of the first things I thought of when the cap went to 255.4 for this year. Well, whatever Justin Jefferson wants, he wants more now, and he's justified to want more now.
Mike Florio, ProFootballTalk.com, 15 days in front of the NFL draft, at least the first round, and it takes place in the Motor City. And speaking of the salary cap going up, what do you think of how Dallas handles high-enders like Michael Parsons, Dak Prescott, and CeeDee Lamb? And I read this last night at ProFootballTalk.com, and the salary cap going up, is not doing the Cowboys any favors by not locking into these players sooner. You made a fantastic point with that. Is it quite risky how they are working deals with players like those guys?
Well, I'm still trying to figure out what the real motivations of the Jones family might be. And I've been fashioning this idea that he's just acting like Jerry, the owner of the team, and the general manager, acting like he wants to win another Super Bowl. And the real play is keep the Cowboys the most popular and relevant and watched team in the NFL, even though they haven't been to an NFC championship game since 1995. The Vikings have been to 4 since then. Right. The Cowboys have been to 0 since then. They and Washington are the only 2 teams that have that drought for that long in the NFC. And they managed to keep the team popular. And the specific problem that they have now, when they have young emerging talent, they wait too long to pay them. Look what happened with Ezekiel Elliott. He held out, and he got a great contract by holding out. With Dak Prescott, when the window opened on a long-term deal for him after 3 seasons, they waited. They forced him to play for like $2 million in his 4th season. Then they franchise tagged him his 5th season. And then his 6th season, they were going to tag him again, and they realized, well, wait a minute. If we tag him now, we can't keep him from becoming a free agent next year because it's a 44% raise over his 2nd tag, and we can't pay him that. So they were caught over a barrel, and they got desperate, and they did this 4-year, $160 million contract that puts him in the exact same spot now, where without an extension, he can walk away after this season. And they're moving closer to that point with C.D. Lamb. And, the Cowboys flagship station in Dallas is putting out this idea that Micah Parsons' act is wearing thin, and I've seen no pushback whatsoever from the Cowboys on that, which would suggest that maybe they believe what's being put out there. And why not just pay these guys? Give them their reward. It is the cost of using your draft pick on a great player and developing a great player. You win the lottery, but you have to pay the jackpot to retain the services of the player. But that's just the way it is. That's what the Vikings are dealing with. They won the lottery with Justin Jefferson. Now the jackpot goes to the ticket, not to the holder of the ticket. And that's where the Cowboys, I think, have gotten themselves into a mess. And one of the reasons when they say they're all in, but they can't do anything, their hands are tied by the gigantic cap number. They knocked it down a little bit with Dak Prescott, but it's still huge. They have the cap number with him. They have C.D. Lamb entering the 5th year of his contract, and they've got Micah Parsons, who should not set foot on a field until he gets a 2nd contract, given the position he plays.
Right.
The closer you are to the ball, the more likely you are to get injured and have the kind of injury that keeps you from ever getting the money you deserve. So, yeah, they have a mess, and it's all because they wait too long. And I said this yesterday on PFT Live. They are, in my opinion, and despite all the great things the Jones family has done for the NFL and for the Cowboys, when it comes to these types of situations, they are cheap, they are short-sighted, and they are not as smart as they think they are.
Football feast.
I saw the Ravens GM piece at PFT. If the GM DaCosta is correct and the backside of the draft is fraught with undraftable players, maybe because with the COVID year and NIL to a certain extent, and maybe age is playing into this. Like Michael Penix Jr., when he gets his 2nd contract, if he does, he's going to be 29, close to 30 years of age. And
damn, that's old.
Right, but it's a quarterback.
He should just give up.
It doesn't matter as much as a running back, but
right.
But age.
I'm being sarcastic, by the way.
Right, but age. I even though I don't think it was in there, age I believe is playing into what DaCosta was talking about. So. When it comes to undraftable players, ends of Saturdays, round 6 and 7 and stuff, if he's accurate, do you see this as a trend for coming years?
Well, but the reality is if players start staying in school longer, right, at some point it all kind of evens out because they stay longer, so they enter the draft pool the next year. And the players who would have entered the draft pool that year stay in school another year. So,
you're right.
A lot of guys come out early and don't get drafted at all. And I'm a firm believer, hey, if you can get paid, now that these guys are getting paid at the college level, stick around and do it. And, Paul, I don't know if you've talked about this Super League concept where they're going to potentially take 80 teams and create basically an NFL college version where you would have a union, collective bargaining, you would have a salary cap, presumably. You might even have a draft. But what you also will have is contractual language. These guys may be bound to stay with their teams for a certain number of years. Just like you sign a contract with the Vikings for 4 years. You're stuck for 4 years unless the team decides to tear it up. So these are all realities that this revolution in college football will create for the NFL, and it's for the NFL to pivot toward dealing with it. But, the reality is There will always be guys available every year. There are great players in college football, and if some of them stick around in college football another year, there will be somebody else the NFL welcomes in, and they go into the blender, and the best players make it onto the field, and they'll wait until next year to add whoever the best players are coming out in the draft that year.
PFT.
With Rashee Rice into the equation, and with the drag racing on a freeway terrorism, what legally becomes of that Chiefs wide receiver?
Well, first of all, it depends upon what the prosecutors choose to do. And, when you talk about the most powerful people in any given jurisdiction, people think judge is the one at the top of the pyramid. The reality is the prosecutor, because the prosecutor has discretion. You can go a lot of different ways. Do you prosecute him for the marijuana possession? The prosecutor in that area had previously said no more prosecutions of any kind for minor marijuana possession issues, and then got some pushback, and now they're going to be selective there. But that's nothing compared to the street racing with bodily injury, which, based upon my reading of Texas statutes, looks like a 2 to 10 year worst case scenario. And we hear that all the time. We hear the worst possible outcome, and then whatever happens is usually far less than that. 2 to 10 for that. 1 to 5 for leaving the scene of an accident with basic bodily injury. If it's regarded as serious bodily injury, it goes up to 2 to 10 as well. And I think Rashee Rice realized he was in checkmate. Left the scene, which was stupid and irresponsible, but realized he was in checkmate. All you can really do at this point is admit, I was driving, and I take responsibility, and I'm not going to play games. I'm not going to force judicial resources to be expended in a way that would prove I was driving the car beyond a reasonable doubt. I'm going to throw myself on the mercy of the prosecution and the court and hope that I get something far less than what I could have gotten. But I think he's going to get prosecuted because that crash resulted in injury. And, a lot of these kinds of situations, the outcome is what determines the punishment. But the behavior is the same. It's a but for the grace of God go I scenario where I did something really reckless and really stupid and nobody got killed. So I get a slap on the wrist. But the other guy who does the thing that was just as stupid and just as reckless but wasn't lucky and somebody got killed or seriously injured, that's the guy who becomes made an example of. But the behavior is the same.
Right.
If you really want to deter the behavior, you can't just give a guy a slap on the wrist because he got lucky. Because the next person who does the same thing may not get lucky, and the unlucky person will be the one who gets seriously injured or killed as a result of that behavior.
Time for 2 more. Mike Florio, ProFootballTalk.com. What do you do first night of the draft? Like 15 days from today. I mean,
drink heavily.
Is there PFT tweeting and like stories and stuff from you? I mean,
how do you not know this?
Well, your staff. Okay, all right, 3-2. Your staff does an unbelievably good job on that night, but it's like an opportunity to sit in the barn, have a couple of drinks, and tweet and kind of take it in, as opposed to arduously working. Like you generally do 94% of the time.
I will go to the barn unless my son squats on it before I can get down there. And we've got 5 full-time writers. We will come up with a rotation in advance for the posts that we will do based on pick 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yada, 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 yada.
Yeah.
And I will do the first 10 to 15 picks, I will do like a real-time video reaction that will then get packaged and posted, and YouTube and PFT posts. And, I try not to be in the bag so that I can speak properly. But, I mean, if I'm in the barn, there'll be a cigar, there'll be a drink, there'll be, some videos as we react to each of the picks as they go. So it's a very active night. It's a fun night. The 3.5 hours fly by. And then, like that first night of the draft, for as great as it is, the second night is okay. By the end of the second night, you're kind of like, we just get this over with. By the third day, it's like, what the hell are we doing? And they can do all the Brock Purdy, Tom Brady bullcrap that they want. Nobody knows which of these guys, rounds 4, 5, 6, and 7, are going to become players. That's all to be determined later. You could look at every one of them and say, hey, that guy could be a Hall of Famer, but we won't know it until they go play. And no amount of hype and no amount of BS and no amount of reciting the credentials of every guy who was ever drafted late and made it to the Hall of Fame, or not drafted at all and made it to the Hall of Fame like Johnny Randall, that doesn't hold my interest And I think for most people, only the most hardcore of hardcore are going to care about rounds 4, 5, 6, and 7. So, that's the day that I exercise we have a staff here that can handle those issues, privilege, and I just kind of pay moderate attention to what's happening, and less attention as the day goes on.
And your Minnesota Vikings, obviously don't have any picks on Friday as of now, rounds 2 and 3. So, say if they don't,
I'm going to be like Mike Ditka and go golfing then.
If they don't end up with any picks that night, and they do trade up for a quarterback, say it's McCarthy, Daniels, or May, then my suggestion is using the field house at Twin Cities Orthopedics Performance Center, bringing that new quarterback in and having season ticket holders, come in and stuff like that. I think that'd be a lot of fun if you don't have any picks. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look, if this guy's going to become the potential heir to Fran Tarkenton 40-some years later, part of the goal is market. And you know what? This is funny. This is completely unrelated to the question, but it is related. Look at what women's basketball has done by seizing upon and taking full advantage of the star power of Caitlin Clark. And I think it's incumbent on every other sport to recognize when you have a star, you prop that star up and you maximize the attention and you make that as big of a deal as it can. Now, it has to be a star player. It has to be a good player. But, teams out there in every sport need to understand the key to getting the most possible people interested in what we're doing is to sell and sell and sell our star talent as aggressively as we can. And kudos to NCAA women's basketball and the Iowa program for doing that. And, if the Vikings go all in and trade up and get a quarterback, it's very smart for the Vikings to commence immediately the process of turning that guy into the next number 10.
Have a great day, my brother, and I'll call you soon.
All right, see you.
Mike Florio, ProFootballTalk.com, and NBC's Football Night in America. Now, Nachito fans of Ben Lieber, and there are many of you. He generally joins 9 to noon on Thursdays, but we're calling an audible this week. Ben Lieber will offer up some of his opinions around the corner when 9 to noon continues on KFAN.